Does this look all right? Look good?
You look good.
Beautiful.
Are we
Good.
Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay. Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Leigh McCloskey.
And
I am an artist, an actor, an author, a visual philosopher, a father, a husband, a leader of a discussion group for over 33 years, and a storyteller, first and foremost.
I read somewhere you call yourself a Renaissance man.
Indeed,
What, can you explain that?
Well, the Renaissance, it's really that in the Renaissance, the model of mind was, and this is why you see in Renaissance frontispieces where we see the author or we see the polymath, as they call it, is there's spokes in the wheel, and around the outer periphery are everything from mathematics to the knowledge of poetry and music and wine and song, because what it's doing is saying that the human psyche is not one discipline or another, but actually that all of the questions we ask, we cultivate unique languages for. And so why I say the Renaissance model is this story that we're returning to this realization that we are the outcome of a great journey. And so we must develop tools, as we had in the Renaissance, that begin to teach us that we are the macrocosm, microcosm, meaning we're the universe in miniature. And when we know that, we step back in center stage and say, so I must tell the story, because it's not to tell you that your story is wrong, but together we come together in ensemble and we discover our deeper nature by sharing a sense that we're much more interesting than we think. And that's why I'm convinced that a Renaissance will come when we hold together a sense that, you know what, why not tell the better story simply because we can? See, that's creative.
Wonderful. Where did it go? How did, why did it disappear?
I think that what we're going to understand is that when we begin to perceive ourselves not as being born into time, but born into creation, and that our DNA is revealing now that we wear the weave of not simply our own humanity, but all of humanity. And therefore, to look at ourselves as you would look at an ancient tree, that we see how rings of capacity hold more and more greatly, in a way, you'd say, the possibility of the tree itself. And that's what I see, and what the Maya were talking about at the end of the calendar. It was saying that as you see our step pyramids, realize that you as human have been building a remarkable holy mountain, the self that is the composition of these vast eons of development that now allow you in time, your time self, to hold this ancient mountain. And that's the point, meaning that we finally realize that we are the technology, and that we separated in order to project outward our own innate capacities. And that's when you look at the Renaissance of Michelangelo, of Leonardo da Vinci, you think of the Sistine Chapel, you think of David, he's 16 feet tall, everything is enormous. God is on the ceiling, far away from, but in that separation comes Beethoven, Mahler, this sense of we're not going to get there, even that sense of romantic futility, I will die, and But what that's doing is, I will do this simply because it must be done. Not because there's a guarantee that God's going to bless me or I'll be touched. As a matter of fact, to express many of these things as culture went by was to say you were touched. So rather than it being creative, bravo, it was, there's something abnormal about this imagination of yours. So we went through that, I'm convinced, to do what Jung calls individuate, meaning we went through a process of separation. This is what my tarot revealed in black and white, is I started to see that like a piano, that the keys of consciousness, these unique stories of time and experience, have been conditioning the instrument of who and what we are. And that we're now the outcome of this great conditioning. We can stand in the center of our experience now and see ourselves as ancient Egyptian, as Hittite, as Amazonian, as African, and we realize we're on a sphere now. So it's not either or, it's when we stand in the library and understand it's not about being for or against, but really the outcome of this great story that, like life and love, is beyond our comprehension, or the ocean. But then we stand in it and say, well, maybe it's not figuring it out. Maybe its larger story is that it's been figuring itself out. And now it's for me, as a co-creative being, to tell a story from all of this possibility. And that's why in this room, artists line the walls. Because I'm reminded by artists that we don't want to tell each other how to paint or what to paint. We want to inspire each other to paint. Because I'll learn from the universes that come through you or you. And this is the generosity of the creative spirit. And that's why I see that there is a relationship to the emerging Renaissance through our creative and imaginative willingness to say yes rather than yikes.
That's awesome. So I'm sensing that it's an evolution of consciousness. And so basically, but consciousness is like almost like it feels like it's a big cell that encases humanity or the universe, right?
Well, you know, if you think about one of the reoccurring motifs here is the chalice, but of course that's the grail, the chalice, the womb. What this is really trying to say, and why we have that symbol, is that if you think about what does the chalice do, it holds the waters. So what we've been doing in this age of separation, and this is why in the journey toward, in the hieroglyph here, the mirror or self-reflection is that by feeling distanced from, I am not myself, I'm not there yet, in that creative yearning, we created that which to a certain degree hardened us. You know, it hardened us in a good way and in a difficult way. In a sense, we're too hard now. It's saying, lighten up. But all of that armoring, all of that layering, which wasn't one life, but in a sense the repetition of environments where creativity is squelched, where freedom of or independence of thinking is squelched. But if we don't look at that through a victim's eyes, but look at that through a type of, let's say, or a plant's eyes, you'd say, well, while the seed was sprouting and going through the earth compressed and didn't let the plant, which always wants to blossom. You know, in a sense, we're forced to grow. And that's what I feel so much is we've been forced to grow to finally, in the same way as a plant, to hold the implication of our blossom. So it's not to destroy the infrastructure. It's not to say we were wrong at any point, but to say that the energies of the last season, which brought the bud, the hardening, the creating of the chalice, do you know, since this I can keep it together.
Yeah.
Now is saying, now trust the beauty of the chalice. And this is the feminine. This is the waters that say, now as you trust your blossom, you begin to unfold not by being against something or getting somewhere, but by actually surrendering to the possibility of your own greater beauty. And if we understand that the petals of the human flower are not one of us, but each of us are a petal of that flower, then we start to say, I will surrender in my own way. Because I have a unique heart, a unique experience. But I honor this in you. Now really the true namaste, I honor the God within you, but meaning it. That it's not enough for us to, in a way, be alone in this Aquarian realization. It's the shared ensemble. It's the theater of creation. And this is why the archetypes of the tarot, the blossoming of the painting, Phoenix Arise, is so important, because I think that when creation, art, which is the language you are written in, reveals these things, it's saying, I don't expect you to believe anything. I want you to remember you are far more beautiful than you think. And like love, you're never going to figure out the things that really matter. So enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
And this is very important, because when you start to see what enslaves us, it's ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, we want to blame it on someone else, but really it's the way we think.
Yeah.
You know, are you born of a magnificence that has been seeking to blossom through you as its face and expression in time as a petal of a shared humanity? I like that story better. And from a quantum perspective, once we introduce that into the possibility of things, it begins to follow its own.
That's wonderful.
Generative energy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, we have an exhibition called Bridge to the Soul, and it's going to travel. Good. And it's going to travel to Turkey and Germany, but we've been having this conversation about creativity. What is creativity? So how is your art a bridge to the soul? How is your own personal art and then the big art a bridge to the soul?
I really take the truth that we are soul. You know, we think we have a soul, like an appendage. But the soul is saying, and this is the truth of matter, mater, mother. What this reveals to me, what creation reveals to me, is we've been taught to start with the second principle, math. So we think in terms of distance, time, getting there, separation, the division between things. But when we start with that unifying sense of the life principle of creation, then it starts to inform us that this will naturally unfold. You will plant the seed in this life principle. Think of the seed of that which germinates pregnancy. The gestation is not something that anyone can figure out. It's a miracle that takes place because of what was set in motion. And this is what the life principle seeks now, is this knowledge of matter, mater, mother, meaning that I am the very weave. I am soul. I am anima mundi. I'm not the soul of some. I am the radiant soul of all. And as you know this, you'll stop moving forward in time to find that distanced soul. You'll stop using math as your first principle, and you'll begin to use life. Then you'll trust your breath, and you'll realize that we commune in what is considered inspired conversation, because true consciousness never seeks to dominate nor overwhelm another consciousness. It seeks to nurture and therefore allow the uniqueness of that consciousness to awaken on its own. That's the sheer generosity of this place. But our math has inverted this. But it was for a reason. It was like we had to strengthen our unique identity so we would not be swept away by our own greater energy. That's why in my work, a lot of it, what's very important alchemically, is it's fixed. It is neither from hallucination nor does it create hallucination. It creates fixity that allows the imagination to say, now that there's a relationship where you're not in motion, but you're fixed and I'm fixed, between us we will amplify your imaginative knowing. Do you see how that draws forth this energy of the living library? We're not seeking another life, we're not seeking a different experience, we're realizing our breath, our life is the experience, and that's why we are soul. And in that adjustment, then the soul says, remember, your unique being is soul. Therefore, you are an art form of consciousness. It is not what you produce as art. You are the art. Live well. You are beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a different way of thinking.
No, it's amazing. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And that's creation.
That's creation. Yeah.
Because creation says, I love you.
Yeah.
I just want to have true relationship.
Yeah.
I don't want you to tell me what I am. And this is where I really have come to really honor the knowledge of the feminine, which is, don't define me. Love me. Surrender to my mystery. I'm not something you're going to explain away.
Yeah.
And that's when we enter the creative state, the loving state.
The loving state.
Because we're willing to enter a mystery and say, I don't need to know.
Yeah.
I need to explore.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was thinking, I'm coming to the knowing that it's everywhere. It's in plants, it's in rocks, and I mean that creation is creation, and it is art.
And if you think of that as life source,
that
everything
source
is jumping up and saying, let's sing, let's dance. And you know, when you're in a poetic mood, the stones sing to you, the birds sing to you. And you'd say, well, I can't prove anything in court that way. But you know what? Listen to this song. It is its own proof.
Yeah.
You know, we grovel before, as Nietzsche said, sheer fact. And I say in our age, we added on, and bad ideas. You know, it's time to liberate ourselves by saying, I am interested in the song of the earth. And guess what? Once we say that, it's interested in us. We expect relationship to emerge simply because, well, we're so entitled. It's like, I'm this and I'm that. And I'm thinking, really? Do you think that's going to get her attention? Or is it?
So true.
Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing.
We've got really bad manners. I've been really informed that we have absolute access to everything, but we have really rotten etiquette. I even call this the etiquette of energy, meaning that it's about manners. It's about how do you treat consciousness. We think it's abstract because we begin with math rather than sentient when we begin with life.
Wow.
You honor things when they're sentient.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You dominate them when they're abstract.
Yeah.
Because you're in charge.
Wow.
You can see history.
I see.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
No, it's really cool. I think what your conversation is very life-giving, and that's what art is. Do you know what I mean? As you're talking, it's like we're getting full of what we are and nurtured.
Because it's generous.
Yeah.
That's what really, when we think because the knowledge, people talk about what's the knowledge of the feminine, the masculine. And you can simplify that the knowledge of the masculine within us is the knowledge of form. And we, for thousands of years since Aristotle, have been really, what's the difference between things? So our formal, our shorthand is so quick. This is why we're so highly judgmental. It's not personal. It's structural. Because we've been so dominated by the knowledge of the masculine, the formal difference between things, the mathematical. But the feminine is the knowledge of energy. So she says, I say I love, therefore I am. The father archetypally says, I think, therefore I am. And the human heart, this crucible of love and thought, is when I think I'm myself and not you. So I think we're different. But when I love, I realize we are what? Human. We share the same qualities. And it's as if the species itself must mature to hold this right angle in the heart. Do you see this love and thought, these two hemispheres, or the duality of the eyes, to finally trust, in a sense, the eye of synthesis, but even more than that, this eye, which is soft, you know, when we're born, and you see how an infant, and when we die, when we're elder, a lot of times they're in this very wondrous state. They're not focusing. They're feeling. This is why when we experience as adults awe or love, and we feel a sense of wonder, it's animating our whole story of these two eyes. It's telling these eyes, listen, you're holding the form. Relax a little. It's far more wondrous than you think. So this is why I think that we've created these eyes, and we're starting to trust this generative force, which is saying that your generosity now, not simply to yourself, but to the story that to be human is a difficult journey. So when you honor that the sorrows aren't yours personally, or the structuring of judgment isn't yours personally, but your willingness to step into the difficulty of that questioning and saying, from within this, how will I once again leaven a sense of wonder, a sense of dissolution of these old forms that are no longer necessary. That's why we're heroic on this planet. We're the ones that will willingly, you know, we said we'll step into the not knowing. You know, it's easy to be all knowing, and so I'll stay out of it and just do it.
Wow. Wow.
Amazing. Just amazing.
So this is just going to the questions. In one word, what does art mean to you?
Life.
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 Life. Yeah.
And your work does it come from dreams, meditations? You said you were talking about the sculpture that it told you to have secrets. How do you tap into that?
You know, I really feel that I was very fortunate because my profession has always been acting. And one of the great things is when you take a creative meeting publicly in one profession, you keep the other professions private. But really what it was is I realized that was cultivating that conversation. But for me, my questions were really about what is this inheritance of being human? I realized that we were given this vast possibility to reach so many different stories and systems and traditions. And so I realized in my profession that was one conversation. It was what it was. I wasn't going to critique it. It was like any business. It had its values. But that didn't stop me. As a matter of fact, I felt that I said, well, wait a minute, because I did the television show Dallas, and that was 33 years ago. But it allowed me to move here. You know, to move it, and then I started discussion groups here over 33 years ago, again, really taking a page from Ralph Waldo Emerson and the American Transcendentalists, because I love Emerson. I've spent years in discussion group with Emerson. And it's this model of that if the conversation isn't in the world, then have the conversation where you live, not about what's missing in that world, but realize that what you bring to the conversation in the world you are growing, like a garden, will become that which you bring back to the system. And that's really why I'm very excited or happy now, is because I realized that this was what was growing by the questions that I couldn't ask in that direction. But the actor in me gave me this great gift, is you're taught, don't over-identify with the role. Let the impassion, the embodied, the nature move through you. But don't think you are it. Whether you're a murderer or a saint, you're neither. You're allowing it, like a piano, you're allowing the musicality of that perception to animate you, to educate you, certainly, because one's psyche moves beyond, in a way, personal bias into, oh, I'm seeing the mathematics, I'm feeling the mathematics of how this world can be added up so differently. Thank you, character. But it taught me, and this is why my work on the tarot and the archetypes, and I think my work with mythic structures, that the actor in me taught me about the theater of it, not to over-identify. And I think a lot of times when people don't have an acting background, they so over-identify with the archetypes, and it becomes, you know, laden with guru, I'm this, you're not that. And what I love about theater is it says, wait a minute, we're actors, we're storytellers. So we're going to gather in a circle around the fire. And first of all, I'm going to honor your capacity in the same way I do if you're a dancer or a musician, meaning I want you to be great. Because I know if you're great, you're going to inspire me to be great. It's a system of generosity. It's not a banking system of consciousness. And we have really had a type of accountant's daydream about what consciousness is. Well, you got this debit, credit, you got the good people and the bad people. I don't mean to make fun of anybody, but it's just that sense of that story has been told and told and told. And that's why I realized that the actor in me said, basically, Leigh, all these systems are theater. They're neither true nor false. Alchemy isn't something you need to prove, but use it as a metaphor, as an analogy. The transformation of one quality or condition into another. And lo and behold, the linoleum of my studio floor becomes alchemically the true depth of our ancient story being told in paint, storytelling, and imagination. The very tools that we used in the beginning in the caves when we were painting the paintings in the cave, and with fire and storytelling creating universes of meaning, because to be human is to seek meaning, not objects. And this is where we've really had this difficulty, but that's why I feel that all of the sense of ensemble, the theater, even my work on the archetypes, I feel is why I think it's such an important work, is that I didn't go in as a believer. I went in as an explorer. So what it revealed to me, in the same way that if you play a great character, you play Hamlet, you're informed by a type of energetic being, perception that says, listen, like a tuning fork, if I resonate as Hamlet through another actor, it's going to be just as much Hamlet. It's going to be another scintillating implication. But through you, I'll awaken with a unique disposition. I will be just as real, just as true, but I'm not one thing in a static sense. I'm a quality or a condition that seeks to express itself through each uniquely. And this is really what the archetypes are trying to teach. And this is why, when I could finally, after the 17 years, I stood at the center of the wheel, and I realized profoundly that we were creating now a theater of perception that is going to teach us, don't over-identify with the roles, but allow the role playing to inform you. In the same way that if you're inspired when you paint or you sing, we're informed by that inner spirit. And what I tell people about acting is nobody can tell you how to do it. You know, you don't have experts going, well, I've got a PhD in acting. Or, you know what, I've got a special prayer. And I jokingly say it's not that you don't turn to prayer. At certain times in theater, this play is horrible, please God. But it is that sense of we're developing constantly, I think, tools for the 21st century, which is a type of synesthesia, where it's not going to be one art form, going back to that Renaissance model in the beginning, but really a wheel of capacities, where one, like my painting self, came from my desire, because I was watching a calligrapher when I was at Juilliard studying acting, and that was about breath, about gesture, about emotional connection, about the life breath. And I thought, that's an actor's job. How do you connect emotions? So I didn't start to paint to be a painter. My dad was a painter. I used the pigment as a way of creating concrete connection. Do you know, so it actually was to physicalize. And I was trying to find violence in this character, and so I was using my elbow, my knee, I was hitting the thing. And so I wasn't trying to paint, you know, I was really trying to express. So I realized that to a great degree, part of the power of my artwork is that I never illustrate anything. It's the very tool I'm using to explore, in the same way that if I play a part, I don't know where it's going. It wants me to create a vessel that allows me to navigate its oceans uniquely, because every night there will be a different performance. Different currents will come up, and it says, follow me. I'm not just something static. I'm not a light bulb that you're going to reproduce 100 million times. That's a very different conversation.
Wow.
So that's
But it's like, how did this whole thing, like, how long did this take? Or like, did you do like different parts, or like, how did it happen? Like, how was the flow? Like, how was
what was the creative process?
The creative process, and this is very important in an archetypal or mythic sense, because I've been dealing with mythic and archetypal patterning, certainly in our discussion groups, everything from Blavatsky and Theosophy for 21 years to Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell. You know, so in a way, that's the conversation that's been going on here. And that's why when my world archetype, which if people look at my website, they can go to the tarot drawings and a sample chapter from my book. But if they look at the world archetype, that is dated 9/11, 1986, and there are twin towers and twin pillars. And the story is the falling away of the binary consciousness, because there's this image of really the serpentine energies, but you see the feminine, the return of the knowledge of the mother, or anima mundi, the soul, that says, I remind you now, as the old binary falls away, that you are rooted into ancient condition, these depths, and that you can now trust that you are the outcome of this. And why that becomes a profound setting is that then the hieroglyph of the human soul, the studio that I begin painting, begins on 9/11/2001 when the towers come down. And it would be insane to say I'm going to paint everything in a room. I mean, as a matter of fact, I find out, you know, in looking back, that half of my friends thought I had gone off the deep end. Here I am painting the floor, and it's like, don't you have canvas, dude? You know, it's like, I'll get you one, man. This is crazy. Who's going to come to your house to see this? Do you know that sense of how? But in a way, I realized that on 9/11 there was this Noah moment, just archetypally. I thought the last flood was water. This flood is information. And I thought of the metaphor of home and how I'd gathered to certainly raise a family, my wife and I, who've been in love and celebrating our 35th anniversary in August. You know, this. But I think that that's, when we look at art, we always have to say, well, where is it? What was this the outcome of? Because it'll really give a key into what it's trying to tell us metaphorically. And I think that that's why this beginning on 9/11/2001, with this emergence of a language called the Watcher language, which is a rhythmic entity, that I start following like a type of musical riff. Again, when you, this is what the creative arts teach you. If you're singing, you're playing the piano, you go with it.
Yeah.
You're inspired, you go, because you know that that wave's going to take you where you couldn't go if you're going, well, first I have to figure this out. It's like, you take the boat and see what, talk about it afterward.
Yeah.
And that's why this took me on a journey. It begins with weaving of Kuan Yin, the Chinese mother goddess Kuan Yin. And she, again, trusting this actor's instinct. You have to listen to the inner voice, both full of folly and wisdom. But she starts to tell me, she starts this story of Kuan Yin. She says, I remind you now that the waters are returning home. We are transforming the linoleum of your assumptions into your ancient depth.
Wow.
Realize that energy is not abstract, but sentient. When you look at this, then you'll realize, as the Watchers are saying, as the cells that create and sustain your body and being, everything is necessary to the weave of the whole. Everything is whole and holy. And as you return home to the painted cave, meaning the technology you left a long time ago, you'll begin to understand that you are the technology. And because this is a cave painting in a domestic space, in a home and a library, it's telling us, and this was the remarkable thing, because this then, for 3.5 years, I'm on the floor, painting what I'm calling, it's a metaphor, you know, it's, and thinking that's where it's going to stop. Oh, you know, silly me. But I'm also realizing that just from a perspective, I'm literally on my hands and knees. I'm in a child state looking down rather than away.
Yeah.
So suddenly I'm not looking into the future or past for where I am. I'm looking into depth, that I'm the outcome. So suddenly I'm thinking like a tree. I'm seeing that, oh, I don't grow out of this motion to get somewhere. I'm actually growing out of this depth that's saying, you see, you don't come from somewhere, you are all this. That's a very different proposition. That's why then for, you know, because I'm still working on this, it flows out. And it would be a comedy routine, because I'd keep saying, well, you know, it's just a thought experiment. I'm going to try the, you know. And then that idea, I often joke that I don't have ideas. They have me. You know, like I thought I'd draw 1 or 2 of those tarot things. You know, little did I know that it would pick me up by the saying, for 17 years now, you're going to be working on that, because, and I think it's the actor's willingness not to be, you know, I have something I have to prove to you. You know, and that's why on 2001 for really the whole thing, and as it's also multidimensional. You put on chroma depth 3D glasses, and this becomes multidimensional. What's astounding about it is it's a technology, but it's an imaginative technology that says that because I'm fixed and you're in motion, you're the key. Your imagination is the key. This synthesizing, and that's why I said about the Noah effect. I said, you know, I really want to not tell my neighbor what's wrong with his politics. I want to, within where I live, within the footprint of my home, of my unique heart, my unique relationships, tell my daughters why I think being human matters, why it's a noble enterprise, and why we need to share, at least where we live, a story we can live with. That's what I love about this art, is I say, you know, I can live with his ideas. As a matter of fact, I do. You know, I'm not telling my neighbor you have to live like this. He might not even know this exists, you know? And I think that's the metaphor of the human heart. How do we begin to say, listen, you've journeyed. You've earned this face, this form. And the difficulty you experience, guess what? That's the mark of your heroism. You're willing to take on the difficulties of being human, not to step outside of them. That's too easy. You're a true artist of consciousness. You took on the heroic battle. Isn't that beautiful? You see, to me, once we start telling a beautiful story about why we've been so tormented, we'll stop thinking like victims and start to think, because I often say, if you were interviewing the marble that Michelangelo, who's saying, I'm just removing what's not necessary, I'm just releasing that which is in the stone, every time the chisel hit you, you would scream out in pain, what are you doing? And from the marble's perspective, you say, there's this sculptor that keeps saying he's going to let something out of me, but all I know is it hurts. Do you know? And this is why I think that we start to see that the sculpting is not just our form, but that there's been a sculpting of human forms across the ages, and for a time now, we can see this greater implication. Do you know, so we start to say, what we share is being human. And from a library's perspective, each spine, each name is essential, because the question isn't proving something. It's about life. It's about exploring something. So if you turn all the books into refractive lenses, suddenly you have this great jewel of consciousness that says each refraction is a unique story. I need your journey in the same way an electron spins in all of its probable paths. Your thread is essential to the tapestry. Then we have a body that goes, I like that. I'm part of this. Rather than I've got to get into that other room. I'm not there. This isn't the right life. I'm not the avatar. I'm not Jesus. And to me, that's like saying the theater is down the road. Even if it is, well, in the meantime, at least let's put on some theater we enjoy. Do you know, this rather than waiting for, oh, now actually that you've spent your life in a seat critiquing another play, you can go be part of a play. And I just think the math is crazy. And I think we're in the time of do the math.
Do the math.
You can believe anything you want. But let's add it up.
Right.
Do you know? Because if it doesn't add up to life, it's only adding up to concept. And I don't know about you. For me, I need life to nourish me. Concept is exhausting me. Do you know? Give me a paddle. Let me paddle the canoe. Don't tell me about what the canoe is and how large the paddle should be and where it should. I'm going. And that's really part of my soul in 9/11 said, oh great, I realize, I forgot, we're all dead already. How liberating. Let's stop trying to be scared to death about dying all the way to the grave and say, well, if I back engineer the fact that I'm already dead, then I might as well commit myself to the life I wanted to have led because I'm dealing with memories already. So,
Carpe diem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Seize the carp.
So this isn't done. This is still in process.
It's in process.
Oh.
And I think that that's the metaphor of the soul. You know, it says,
it's
listen,
always,
while you are living, you will always be adding. And that's the interesting thing about all of my work, is I start to realize that its genius is that it's always complete and yet always evolving, always in process. And I thought that's the human soul, the human heart. You know, if we die right now, we're done. The book, you know, final chapter, that's it. But if we don't, great. You know, but it's always in its own ratio, complete. And that's where I think we start to recognize it's not about a hierarchy of ages, it's not about a hierarchy of means, it's really this circular story, this ratio that's forever turning. And that great sense now of, and as it turns, we're starting to see that we're composed of that turning ratio that now begs us to include it. You know, don't tell me the problems. Problems are easy to see. Give something to the context that allows you to add some oxygenate possibility. Don't make it about something.
Oxygenate possibility.
Yeah, oxygenate it. If you can breathe more deeply, suddenly you have much more access. It's not something.
Very empowering.
It is.
And that's what the creative and imaginative are, because they are not a belief system. And that's why I say art is not about painting. It's not about product. It's an approach.
It's an approach.
It's an approach.
Nice. I like that.
Beautiful.
Do you enter what you know with curiosity, a sense of possibility, wonder, I will be mentored by what I engage? Then you're an artist. If you walk in certain and say, I'm simply going to prove what I already know because I'm superior to you, you're an accountant. Nothing against accountants, I think. Talking about the imagination.
Wow. So you were talking about archetypes. Can you talk about that? Do you think that talk about them? And have they been with us throughout time, since the cave paintings?
Yes, because if we think about a piano, and we think of the keys of a piano, you'd say that the human form is that piano. We each share the keyboard. What the journey of the archetypes teaches us is the differentiation between what we would say the informing energies within us. You know, we are both, in a way, storm and fury, pastoral settings and harmony. When people would ask me, say, be yourself, I always thought, well, which one? There's so many, and I can choose amongst a panoply. But this is what the archetypes really helped me to understand, because I was fascinated from the actor's perspective of why, like a radio, when I tune my mind, does this other energy, really informing energy, become like, hey, I'm a serial killer. I can, it's like, okay, that's there. What is it? And it's not personal. It's really this sense of reception. And I started to realize that what the archetypes are is they are a structural pattern, meaning they're a fundamental tuning fork. You'd say 22 tuning forks. They each are a unique disposition, a bit like the planets. Now, when you step into time, in a sense, you awaken that tuning fork. So there'll be unique octaves, unique resonance, unique qualities that move through you, in the same way that when you look at a book and an artist, you might be Matisse or Cézanne, or you might be Michelangelo or David Hockney. It's not that there's one way that the instrument will be played, but what we're trying to do is to use the archetypal patterning. And this is why Joseph Campbell and myth were so important, because he was saying, once you realize, mythically, that to be human is not progressing toward becoming something you're not. To be human is that we move more and more to a type of centrality of vision that says, I see that we've been dealing with these, in a sense, difficulties over and over again since Cain killed Abel. That's not what changes, but it acts as an alchemy that we uniquely respond to, and in that context, then, it cultivates our unique artistry. That's why the archetypal, the mythic setting is so important, because it says you are a mythic weave, meaning you are composed of all of these patterns, and if you trust that, like the actor learns to trust it, then these energies can mentor you. But if you feel you have to control them, I'm this, it's like people who put on a suit and I am that, and like, God forbid you push them too hard, that's because they're only the face, and this is actually saying it's what you can't see. But think of your own body.
A mask.
You can't figure this out. This is absolute genius. I mean, what we can do, we sort of, I'm just a habit. It's like, no. Do you realize how brilliant this bioorganic computing system is? Well, let's just postulate this as a spacesuit, meaning that you create an organic structure that can interface with the values, the conditions, the emotional climate of these given worlds, and that you develop this body that can exist in time, like a landing vehicle, that doesn't stand outside of the planet, like, oh, we're just observing, pray to us, but actually with such humility enters into the soil, literally the difficulty, so it grows up as the animals, as the flowers, as the trees, as Gaia, meaning that you are planetarily of a beauty. Meaning that you like rain fell into this world so that you would know all of its systems. And holographically speaking, you're composed of all of these systems. So when you see the flower and it speaks to you, it's because you are the flower. Look at the way the brain develops. Look at the way we have, through the gestational process, we move from the reptilian, the mammalian, the hominid. This is so important, because when we think of the first principle, this is what the divine feminine, or the feminine divine, is saying. When you think about life, when you honor that first principle, you'll realize that you are the very composition of your own genius. And that when you trust this rapport, it will begin to mentor you, because like all true relationship, it's not it or you, but in a way the surprise of both discovering one another, because we can hold space for true relationship. And so that's where we're really at, is this story of the development of true relationship.
Nice.
Beautiful.
And so, let's talk about your tarot cards. You said you were doing those for 17 years?
17 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, I mean, what made you fascinated in mysticism, and like, what was there a break? You know, sometimes you said you're an actor, and was there some kind of breakthrough, or was it just you were always interested in?
I had, from a very early age, experiences that didn't fit.
Okay.
But I knew I wasn't crazy. But to talk about them was to make oneself crazy. Thus, we find a creative outlet. You know, I'll draw this because if I talk about it, I'll proof. But no,
so as a child, you were seeing things or experiencing things.
And I remember seeing very spherically when I was a child, seeing a lot, and then shutting that down because I realized, oh, that's not the agreement here. The agreement is we wear masks here. So I became very aware of masks. And then when I was very close to nature. I grew up 2 miles from here, so I was very close to nature, climbed trees a lot. I loved nature. But when I was about 13 or 14, I started, it was as if my unconscious dumped into me. I started having nightmares from the age of 14 to 23. I mean, I was just thrust into my unconscious. And I knew I wasn't crazy, but I was just, I mean, I'd had hypnagogic paralysis, which is sleep paralysis where you're awake physically, but you cannot, mentally, but you can't awaken your body, so you're like, trying to move them. And then I had many years also of lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, and that became, to a great degree, like the actor's tool, a mentor. It became the experiential mentor. And what I loved about my education as an actor is so many of the techniques that I was being taught weren't taught, oh, this is a Buddhist technique or a Christian mystical technique. They were just techniques. And that's what I feel from the creative and imaginative, is I was never really interested in sort of the abstract, spiritual, abstract. I was really interested in all ideas that motivated a sense of, my God, what an extraordinary thing we are. You know, so I'd read alchemy, or I'd read mysticism, or I'd read about the mysteries of ancient Greece. You know, because I really thought it's when we enter that romance that the heart goes, hey, this is where there's a lot of material, and if you're not trying to use it as a something to thump somebody over the head with about how smart you are, I'll take you into these worlds, and you'll begin to, in a way, allow them to teach you, to inform you. And that's why I feel that, you know, the odd thing is because my work is, you'd have to say, deeply spiritual, but I would say it is because its primary question is about love. You know, I didn't care about the separated spiritual. It was like, I really wanted to find a way to trust that which I loved innately. You know, and that's why I didn't choose. I would, you know, in a way, they'll joke I'd never belong to a club that would have me as a member. You know, there is something in, I think, the creative psyche that goes, I'm not looking to be a club member. I'm looking to, I'll sit with your club, and just because I love it, I love the theater, but if you say, now sign here and carry the book and go, I'd say, that's uninteresting theater. Do you know, that, I mean, you can do that if you want, nothing against it. Great, if that's your story. But mine is like, I really want to be inspired. I'm not a homesteader. I mean, it's funny, I'm a homesteader. But on the other hand, I found a center which allowed me then to explore, and that's why the discussion groups over the years was this offering to curious individuals, you know, it was public for many years as well. It was just, if you're interested, let's take a text, let's read these ideas, these metaphysical, philosophical, alchemical ideas. You know, let's explore our inheritance. And that's why I feel my tarot is so powerful, is because it comes from this other, I didn't set out as a metaphysician to say, oh, well, you know, I know so much, and I'm an old soul, and I'm just exhausted. You know, because as an actor, I could make that up as well, you know, say, hey, that's a good way to brand it. But, you know, it's that sense, though, I wanted to say, I need to find this, like a gardener finds the truth of the soil. You know, it's not something to make me, in a sense, conceited, but to create a greater humility that if this is in me, if this is possible, if these languages emerge because I was willing to do the discipline, in a sense, the rigor of studying as much as I can, doing, you know, to really do. And I realize that that's why a lot of this has responded, and that I really honor that I'm entitled to nothing. I'm not entitled to a good drawing. I'm not entitled to be a brilliant genius that just goes. And that's why I actually think that the feminine that comes through me, like Eve and Lilith and Sophia, are so beautiful, is I never set out to draw a picture of a beautiful woman. I don't know what that is. What my hand must do is find the central form that finally arises and becomes beautiful. You know, like an awakening rather than an illustration. We are so bound by the surface beauty of things, we have a type of banality. and sentimentality that says, stop going and dive. This is a passionate relationship. It's not a comfortable relationship. It's a passionate one. And in a passionate relationship, there's the alchemy of everything from beauty to wrath. Get used to it. I'm oceanic. Dude, I'm volcanic. I'm not this sort of get away from it. You know, that's dreaming of heavens and the great elsewhere with harps.
Yeah.
You know, as Mark Twain said, developing an interest in a musical instrument we had no interest in our lives. You know, that's what's going to fill us in eternity. Keep the harps.
So back to the tarots. Do you use them like in daily practice? I mean,
yeah.
So you do,
but not in a divinatory sense.
Oh, you don't.
I'm very interested in much more of a conversation with the archetypal psyche.
Okay.
And that's really listening. That's why because I found that in terms of prediction, I'm tremendously gifted that way in a sense, but I cut it off because I use that in a sense to creatively explore character, to explore in a sense to go into that nakedly, but in a way it makes me very honoring of people's privacy. I don't want to know, so I don't really like reading cards because I get too much personal information. What I like to do though is to, like a lot of times when I'm working with somebody, it's very interesting, I'll open the book and an archetype will be there. And a lot of times I'll draw a card and it's the same archetype and then I start a conversation. And that's then this tethering to a type of synchronicity or you know, that is saying, what I want to do is to lead into the person's capacity. Because I think when we read, when, you know, people become too, in a way, too open. You know, I really want them to be effective actors. I don't want to tell them what the performance is going to be or how it's going to go. I don't think that's my right. But what I want to do is to create a trust in their own innate patterning. To say that your relationship, once you set the cards out and you're working with them, is to begin to listen, to begin to understand that in the true dynamics of relationship, it's not one thing stating for another thing, this is what you need to know. Here, take notes, kid, you don't know anything. It's saying that we have such a dynamic relationship that I'll remain silent until you begin to trust your own rapport. Because what I want to do is not to tell you you're wrong or you don't know enough. I want to trust you to trust now that even in the whisperings within you is the story, the meaning that yearns to know itself as you, your unique thumbprint, your unique form. You know, this is the honoring of this archetypal story. That's why the tarot, when people work with it, I always say, you know, when they have my cards or any cards, but to put it around them in a circle. To really sit in the center of a circle and to start looking at their consciousness this way, you know, turning around, because we've been taught through Darwin, the Bible, all these things, it began somewhere and we're evolving in a line. But if you realize that line is actually a curve, and we've been curving to finally come, what, full circle, then we understand that it's not just the direction of these eyes, but really, as I said, this sense of wonder, this center of the circle, that allows, no matter where we are looking now, to see an effective note. You know, so we stop looking at history saying, oh, those Egyptians, they just didn't get it, did they? Or those, you know, but say, no, isn't it brilliant that actually we can have so many manifestations of this variation of what does it mean to be human, that when we stand in the tarot wheel now, we say, ah, this is my technology, my instrument. And why it's so imaginative, it's saying, I'm not going to tell you anything, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, I'm going to stay here to allow you now, as I say, to amplify your own storyteller. And that's when we're really going to enrich one another. We're going to stop saying, oh, I don't know enough. Because God Almighty, that's where people, I don't really know anything about art. I was going, great. No agenda. You don't have to prove something. And then you remind the person you are art. How do you think you got here?
Right.
Really? This is a mess? We might be a mess, but it's, you know, it's just because we keep lifting all this baggage.
Wow. I thought, totally lost I was going into
that's the flow of things. Whoops.
It's my circle. Let's see. Yeah, so behind you is this amazing phoenix.
Yes.
Is it a portal? And two questions, like, what does it mean to you and what it is? It's your personal mythology, I'm thinking. And then when people see your work, do they have breakthroughs or?
It's because it comes from a gestational process. I think that what is so remarkable about the painting behind me, which is called Phoenix Arise, I painted it for 4 years. I finished it in 1997. As a matter of fact, if people can Google, I did a TEDx talk called The Blossoming of Creation, or The Painting Phoenix Arise and the Blossoming of Creation. Why this is so important to our story is that, again, when we think about a painting, it's told in what language? Spontaneous creation. And so it asks us, what are we as human? We're not born of theory. We're born of like energy, spontaneous creation. So like can only be informed by like. Why this becomes so important is that also in painting this, I realized that this was no different than standing in a cave. It was paint and storytelling and asking questions. And in this case, as in ancient times, it was this story of invocation. Meaning, since we cannot go to a multidimensional universe, and yet we are composed of them, maybe I can explore this idea of creation and see where it takes me. When I had completed the painting, I thought that was enough in itself. I mean, but then I created it in, can you hand me those cards that right there behind you?
This one?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
And I, in card form, I recreated it. Why this becomes so important is, and I can show you the other things, we can put them in later, but why this is so important is by accident, happy accident, I dropped the cards. And when I dropped creation, it mirrored itself. And in the mirroring, it revealed a holographic double helix DNA. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. Our holographic DNA is actually telling us that the DNA itself is an art form of creation, and that everything is whole and holy. That's why when this painting in card form, after the DNA, I started playing with the cards, because of course I thought, there's a mystery. And when I did, it began to unfold with mandalas or blossoms. And the story it told, and this is why it's so important, was that each of its blossoms are the recapitulation of creation. So essentially, we have this, the geometrization of creation. And let me just pull this down. And I'll say,
Oh yeah.
because this will show how this painting, you see,
Yep.
and I hope it's not glaring too much, but we see how the geometries are created from the recapitulation of creation, and that this creates infinite blossoms, infinite mandalas from a fixed form, from creation. Why this is very Aquarian is it's starting to say, do you realize that this is a fractal, geometrical entity of creation? So it's holographic, meaning it will tell us that we don't enter time, we enter creation, and that we have been journeying across the ages, beginning with this knowledge of shared creation, into unique geometrization, but not in a mathematical sense alone. The mathematics here come from what? Creation, not the other way around. So this is not geometry leading to creation, this is creation leading to geometry. That's why in the tarot, the Empress gives birth to the Emperor. The feminine precedes the masculine, not the other way around. And our science is based on the opposite. That's why we feel forever more distanced from our science rather than a type of sensual connection, because the sensual connection reminds us we are an art form, meaning that it is that which allows us to enter into our greater mystery, to blossom, rather than simply to hold on to form and battle over the difference between things. So that's why this painting I'm behind, this 5 foot by 7 foot painting, is it revealed spontaneously, I believe, the purpose of creation, which is to blossom, which is the knowledge of the mother. Because she says, I love all of my children. I love all the books in the library. All are necessary to this greater blossom because they're all part of this plant. So whether you're looking down at the seed or at the sprout or the difficulty of the time of the bud, that's you as well. You don't change or leave an infrastructure. It creates the foundation for a new blossoming. And what's important here is that, so the most ancient language, the language of creation, the language of paint, storytelling, and imagination, is telling us...
I just want to give you a heads up.
Excuse me, we're filming up here. Shh.
We knew this would happen.
Because the story here of creation, as I say, of paint as the first language, it's taking us back to the story that, as I say, we are the technology. And the Maya say that the fifth world is the age of flowers. And you think of, well, what's flowering? Creation. Meaning you are whole and holy and holographic. You're not born into time, you're born into creation. You are an art form. And guess what? You will begin to unfold with unique geometries, just the way a unique story told by a unique individual, but each will be composed of this creation. In a sense, we will all be knowing that we are uniquely blossoming in infinite possibilities, but that we are each composed of whole and holy creation.
Are we in the fifth?
This is actually saying that what this hieroglyph is telling me is yes, because the point now is not to convince the neighbor. The fifth world is how do we make sense of having, like Dorothy, left to go to Oz, to come back to the world of black and white. We still have to deal with these eyes. The world is in a difficult place and we know it. It's not going to just go into sort of, oh, it's so wonderful. But it's saying now that you've been restored to the sense that, as Joseph Campbell said, when we understand the mythic, there is no tragedy. Meaning that we start to see that the ages of so much tragedy, so much sorrow, have created the condition now of the blossom that says when you realize that the pain wasn't pointless, but that you can even look at it in the relationship of my tarot, the wheel of black and white, the structure, the knowledge of the Father, the systems, the laws. How is one thing something and not something else? Why are the Egyptians not the Hittites? Why are the Hittites not the Maya? Why are the Maya not the French? You know, that you start to say, oh, well, that's interesting because we've been dividing all of those elements to finally, as this will tell us, come full circle. To realize, like Dorothy, when we return home, we can deal with black and white because our vision has included now our capacity to dream. And that's what gives what I call oxygenation to perception. It's not something, but as we oxygenate, as you know, you said before, we breathe more deeply. And when you breathe more deeply, you simply are able to access far more possibility because you're not afraid. You know, if you're dog paddling and afraid, I don't care how wonderful you're, it's like you're like, I'm in survival mode. And that's why only the stories we tell, only the examples we create can create for this deeper pattern knowing that says, yeah, it's not just me. It's tough to be human. And it's not just tough for me in this life. When I look at history, I go, oh my God, oh my God. You know, it gets worse and worse and worse. Tougher and you think, why would we withstand that? Why wouldn't the species just go, I'm out of here, I can't do this anymore, I'm exhausted. And I think a lot of people are, just dreadfully exhausted. It's like, really? This is 9/11 for me. Really? This is the best we can do? This is like hack writing. You blow everything up? That's bad writing in Hollywood terms. You know? So you realize, no. In every mythic story, the collapse creates in the individuals, this is not a story I'm willing to go over the edge with. I'm having to tell the story I need to tell with those I love, because at least where I live, let me tell a story worthy of being human, rather than waiting for humanity to become worthy. I see humanity as an act of enormous worthiness across the ages because it was willing to suffer the tragedies and sorrows in order to blossom. That's profound. And that's what will create profound art, because we'll fall in love with creation. And when we do creation, we'll say, you see, aren't I beautiful? When you enter my mystery, when you stop trying to figure me out, you stop trying to discipline me into submission, you know? We're much more interesting than we think.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Gosh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's beautiful.
Do you, so this is an ongoing project that we're in. Are you working on anything new, or is this just a...
It's really ongoing.
It's
like
an ongoing,
a huge,
yeah.
multi-tentacled entity. I never...
So you're not going downstairs yet?
Yeah, no, it really, well, it's gone outside, it's gone behind, into the couch, into the cabinets. I feel, and I often joke, I say, you know, we're comic relief for a higher form of consciousness. You know, it's just, there has to be something about this. I feel a bit like, you know, Harold and the Magic Crayon, this book where, you know, drawing the housemates, enters the door. So, but I understand that now, that that's actually true, is that we don't go to the worlds. In a sense, we don't have time to get there. So we create the conditions where we create through rapport a type of amplification because those worlds are already inside of us. And that's why all our ancient sites were about alignment. It said when you align with the stars, you realize you are the stars. And because we don't want to overwhelm you with what we think you need to know, but we want you to know that you are this as well, then in a sense that light in your own mind oxygenates your perception, and suddenly you're willing to look at a much greater spectrum of your human self and say, that is myself as well.
Yeah, pretty amazing. This story is pretty amazing. So transformative art. Why? I mean, you've been hitting on it like in this conversation. Like, why is it so important in this time, and why is it so important for everybody to do transformative art of some sort?
Well, I think if we reverse the equation and say, I am art.
Okay, you are.
If I know that, that is transformative, because I start to make an honoring set of selection rather than one that simply affirms why I am self-loathing. You know, I mean, when we understand that those difficulties aren't personal, like I hate myself, you know, those are inwired. It's like then we start to say the art of transformation will be when, as art, we start to honor this blossom which is tender. You know, we start to say that we've got to begin to hold things gently. We've done such a good job of beating ourselves up. We look at tyranny in the world, I say, well, look at our poor psyche. You're another, you know, shut up, and, you know, don't make me embarrassed again. I mean, all of that is and that's why it's almost an aikido moment. It's not being against something. We're so good at that. It's more of a type of tenderness. It says the transformational art and the art of transformation will be when we're able to hold the ideal of blossoming. And whether it's having children, growing a garden, friendship, or with our beloved, it will have an artistry to it. Because it will be how we approach this song of the earth and the stars and self. And we will say that that's what is transformative. What keeps me immured, what keeps me locked in, is when my ideas don't let me breathe. So my first question is, transformative art, how are my ideas transformative in themselves? You know, am I thinking like a gardener? Let me grow something rich and beautiful and not worry about what I see, but attend to what I'm growing. And it will grow because I've planted the seed. So that's the transformational art. I think when we try to draw, it's like trying to write the great American novel. Good luck. As soon as you have that thought forward, it's like, you'll never do this. It's like if I had tried to do the tarot thinking, I'll do that, I'm like a man who's backed into his room all it's like, where'd that come from? Oh wow, how did that? Because in a way, had I gone toward, I'm going to do that, it would have been overwhelming. But because in a way I just did it, I didn't think about how long or what would be called from me. It became the journey I was willing to take. And that's why I think a lot of it, you know, creatively, imaginatively, the best we can do for one another is say, take the journey. Just take the journey. And just hold the possibility that you're far more interesting than you think. And to be human is noble, not cursed, not sinful, not a mistake, not by chance, but by beauty. And Emerson, as I say, you know, he said beauty is the creator of the universe. And that's an idea I can live with, because I know I can grow my garden and inspire my children, my friends that way. And look at my wife and tell her I love her. You know, the rest is the mathematics of really what I, at this point, a quality of mind that I've done the math, and if it doesn't add up to art, if it doesn't inspire beauty, if it doesn't make you sing and want to dance down the street, maybe you should re-examine what you believe in.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Any questions, John? Very inspiring. Fun.
It is.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's key now. This, you know?
I mean, thank you. It's so wonderful that, you know, you've gone on this journey and that you're here and you're on the mountain and saying, I'm here and I'm here to say something. So that's,
what I love is because it's very, I get this Arthurian sense. The round table, why are we all talking about the Grail? Why do we talk about the romance of the Arthurian legend? Why? It's because the heart knows. We like to sit in a circle together. We don't like it when someone's on a podium going, you know nothing. You know?
Yeah.
Nonsense.
Yeah.
I am all things. Inspire me to remember that I have something to bring to the table. That to be human is a thing of dignity. Wow. I think even the planet will go, I like this. This is called falling in love rather than fear. We've done fear so much. It's not that the fear goes away, but a little love helps balance it.
Yeah. Really wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So be inspired. That's my key. You know?
We are.
Yeah.
You've inspired us.
Yeah.
Good.
But
Yeah.
it's also like this is your daily practice,
Yes.
right? You're like you're doing it, like
Yeah.
you're there, like you're open and you're doing it.
Yeah. And that's why, because we've been gathering, and we have gatherings here. You should sign our. Are you in the email?
Yeah.
Because
Yes, we are.
Because that's, you'll see that there's this footprint of really trying to say that our Renaissance will come from gathering a larger story. Like, I love that people don't come here just to see an artist abstracted, oh, this is what he does, but they come and they see that there's these other stories. Because then we really start the theater again of saying we need each other. We didn't build the cathedrals because I showed up and goes, I'll do the pillars. It's like, and you'll do the floors, and you'll do the windows, and you'll do the vault. You know, it's like we are a team. We're an ensemble crew. We're not a bunch of actors with our backs turned to each other. We know that's lousy theater. You know, this doctrine of nonsense, this doctrine of selfishness. You know, really. Talk to a musician. Talk to a good lover about selfishness. It's like, it doesn't work. You know? It's together.
What's that stone in your hand? Philosopher's stone?
This is a philosopher's stone. This you'll have to. This is a whole nother story.
That's a whole other video.
This. But let's turn this off. I'll show you
Okay,
because
sure.
this will blow your mind. This.